When you think about stories, your mind probably goes straight to your favorite novel, or maybe a film, or those big cultural myths. They're definitely powerful for entertainment, for passing down traditions.
Right.
But what if narratives are actually more fundamental than that? What if they're not just things we consume, but, well, the actual architecture of our minds?
That's precisely the idea we're exploring today. This deep, fundamental link between narrative, the mind, and cognition itself. We're looking at how stories aren't just external cultural things, but really basic mental structures. They organize our whole psychosocial experience. You could almost think of them as the mind's operating system in a way.
And for this deep dive, we're leaning quite heavily on Jalan Simunovic's work, specifically the Cognosystemic theory of human psychosocial relational constructions. Quite a title.
It is, yes.
We'll probably just call it TCCR for short. But the core idea is how TCCR sees narratives forming the cognitive narrative center of what Simunovic terms the Cognosystem, which is basically our mental framework for making sense of everything.
Exactly. And our goal today really is to give you a kind of shortcut into understanding this. It's quite a profound concept. We want to unpack how these narratives shape, well, almost everything. Your identity, your memories.
How you find meaning.
How you find meaning, absolutely, and even the actions you decide to take. It's about revealing that underlying structure of human thought and what that means for us, especially in our social lives.
Okay, so let's start right there with this foundational claim. Narratives as central cognitive structures. It feels significant, doesn't it, to say our minds are actually wired to process and remember primarily through stories.
It is significant, yes.
I mean, if you think about recalling an event, you don't usually remember it like a data sheet, do you? It's more like a sequence, a little personal drama unfolding.
That's exactly the point. And the TCCR really emphasizes this. It states that narratives are definitely not just ornamental or literary. They're described as core cognitive structures that shape identity, memory, meaning, and action.
So it's not just about decoration, it's structural.
It's structural. It's fundamental to how we construct reality, moment by moment, interaction by interaction.
So TCCR's view is that we're not just sort of absorbing information passively. It suggests that through their interactions, people weave the narratives that shape their reality, constantly creating meaning.
Yes, constantly generating meaning in every encounter, every shared experience. It's an active, ongoing process, a continuous storytelling happening both inside us and between us.
And what's really interesting there is that it's not just about individual minds. The theory stresses the power of these narrative systems in structuring and giving meaning to social reality.
That's key.
So these stories aren't just personal blueprints, they're shared blueprints for how we live together, shaping cultures, communities.
Absolutely. They provide that shared framework, which actually leads nicely into the contributions from narrative psychology. I'm thinking particularly of Jerome Bruner. He was such a key figure here.
Right, Bruner. He proposed that the mind doesn't just think in one way, correct? He talked about two modes, the logical-paradigmatic and the narrative. What's the essential difference there?
Well, the logical-paradigmatic mode is our tool for abstract reasoning, for categories, for building formal arguments, sort of like science or logic puzzles.
Okay.
But Bruner really emphasized that the narrative mode is essential for understanding human experience. Logic handles the facts, maybe, but narrative lets us grasp the complexities, the intentions, the emotions, the whole messy flow of human life.
And didn't he also talk about narratives creating possible worlds? That idea seems really powerful.
Yes, exactly. He said narratives allow for the construction of possible worlds, opening the door to imagination and creativity. So it's not just recalling what happened, but exploring what could be, what might have been.
Which gives a much richer understanding.
A much richer, deep, and nuanced interpretation of experience, as he put it. And that capability, he argued, is absolutely vital for constructing who we are, both individually and socially.
So if we connect that back to TCCR, it really supports this assumption that people not only live stories, but think in stories. It's like the default mode for processing experience.
It seems to be, yes. The TCCR perspective is that our beliefs, our emotions, our behaviors, they're all structured by these underlying narratives. You're constantly narrating your life, whether you realize it or not, and that shapes how you understand it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if our minds are fundamentally narrative, how does that play out? How do these narratives actually function day to day? Are they like filters?
That's a good way to put it. Think of them as complex cognitive schemas, mental frameworks. The source material explains they actively shape how we perceive reality. They determine what we notice, what we consider important or irrelevant, and they organize our experiences emotionally and symbolically. They bring a kind of order to the raw data of life.
And crucially, these schemas, these frameworks, aren't just individual creations. They're also culturally shared. How does that sharing actually happen?
Well, think about identity. You don't just invent who you are in a vacuum, right?
Right.
You absorb stories from your family, your community, your culture. And then, importantly, you adapt them. You rewrite them, personalize them to build a coherent sense of who you are. It's a dialogue.
A dialogue between the personal and the collective story pool.
Precisely. Your life story is co-authored, in a way, with the narratives available in your environment.
Which leads directly to this idea of identity itself being narrative. The self isn't some fixed entity, but a story the subject tells to themselves and to others.
In dialogue with their environment.
Yeah.
Exactly. Who you understand yourself to be is this dynamic, unfolding narrative that you're constantly shaping and reshaping.
And the TCCR framework uses this idea to see the person as a narrative node. That's an interesting term.
It is. It means your personal experience is woven into these larger networks of meaning. It views individuals not as static points, but as dynamic organizing centers, active agents who can transform psychosocial reality. It really shifts the focus.
It does. And speaking of dynamics, the source mentions how narrative weaves together emotions and memories in a logical and symbolic sequence. Now, emotions, they feel central here.
They absolutely are. Bruner also stressed that emotions are deeply integrated into the construction of meaning through stories. They provide coherence and relevance.
How do they provide coherence, though? Sometimes emotions feel like they disrupt the story, make it illogical.
That's a fair point. But within a narrative structure, emotions often provide the underlying logic. They make sense within the story's context. A feeling of joy makes sense after overcoming a challenge, for instance. Narratives offer a context in which emotions find coherent expression and organization.
Okay, I see.
And this is where TCCR points to a really powerful application. It suggests that narrative reconstruction enables individuals to reprocess traumatic experiences, re-signify pain, or reorganize their sense of life. This is huge for psychosocial intervention.
So it's about changing the story to change the feeling, or changing how the experience is organized.
Exactly. Techniques like narrative reorganization, which you see in certain therapies, aim to help people transform how they organize and understand their own emotions, thoughts, and experiences by reshaping the narrative around them.
And it's not just that stories shape emotions, but emotions can actually drive changes in the story.
Yes, the TCCR views emotions as active agents of narrative change. Strong feelings can motivate us to adjust how we structure or interpret our stories, both personally and maybe even collectively within a community. It's a feedback loop.
This really highlights how narrative is a unique way our minds encode information, doesn't it? It's so different from just making categories, lists, or logical structures.
Completely different. Narratives excel at capturing the sheer complexity of human experience, including all the ambiguity, the context, the intentions involved. A list tells you what, but a story gets closer to the why and the how it felt.
And that richness makes it especially useful for understanding the psychosocial world.
Yes. The theory argues this narrative encoding is particularly well suited to the analysis of the psychosocial, precisely because our social and psychological lives operate on multiple levels of meaning simultaneously. Relationships, social dynamics, they're inherently complex and often ambiguous. Narratives handle that complexity well.
And the TCCR provides a framework to actually work with this complexity, to understand how the narrative systems constructed by individuals, families, organizations, and communities can be intervened in and rewritten.
Right. And it emphasizes that this can happen across multiple narrative levels, from the individual to the cultural, all while maintaining this flow of interaction and feedback. That's a very ambitious scope.
It really is. And the implications, especially for fields like social work, seem quite profound.
Definitely. This perspective allows professionals to see individuals not primarily as, say, carriers of symptoms or deficiencies, but as narrative beings in continuous construction. It shifts the focus from deficit to potential.
From fixing a problem to helping rewrite a story.
Essentially, yes. It enables interventions aimed at making visible, reconstructing, or re-signifying the stories that sustain suffering or social exclusion. You work with a person's foundational narrative.
Helping them find agency within their own story.
Exactly. Narrative therapy is a clear example. It focuses directly on resignification of subjective experiences through the reconstruction of life stories. It's an active narrative rewriting exercise.
Aiming for what? Greater self-determination.
Greater self-determination, a more harmonious psychosocial development, yes. The goal is explicitly to reconfigure the dysfunctional stories people tell about themselves, opening up new possibilities.
So the TCCR isn't just abstract theory. It's presented as a practical tool, aiming to give social work a proprietary theoretical structure for understanding and intervening in human relationships.
That's the stated goal, to provide a nuanced, powerful lens for working with the very fabric of how people make sense of their lives and their connections with others.
Which brings us back to that core idea. Narratives as the architecture of human thought. Understanding them this way, as these intricate cognitive structures, it really does seem to offer deeper access.
Deeper access to the processes of meaning, identity, and relational transformation? Absolutely. It's like getting closer to the source code of how we experience the world, both individually and together.
So, reflecting on all of this, what does it mean for you, listening? This idea that narratives are fundamental, that they shape our emotions, memories, identity, our social reality. It points towards something quite hopeful, doesn't it? This inherent narrative plasticity.
Plasticity is a good word for it.
Yeah.
Our stories aren't set in stone. Personal, collective, they're dynamic, they can be reshaped.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps. If our reality is woven from these changeable narratives,
Yes.
then how might actively engaging in the reorganization and transformation of our stories, both our own and the ones we share, how might that not just build resilience for individuals, but actually start to reshape the complex social worlds we all live in?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? The potential impact of consciously working with our narratives. It suggests the stories we choose to tell, retell, quite literally have the power to shape our shared reality. A powerful thought indeed.